Wiping it. All right. So good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, April 2nd, 2022. So that's 4-2-2-2-2, which is a 12 or a 3. And my name is Barbara With, and I am a psychic channel, a workshop facilitator, a musician. I do a lot of things. This morning, we're going to do some channeling, but we're also going to talk a little bit about this book, Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels. And this is a book that Kimberly Lilith Phelps, Teresa McMillan, and I published in 1997. But it's the account of the first 4 months of when I started doing group channeling, the very first groups that I did. And I had been looking for people to do a group. I had been curious to know what would be said in a group. I was a big Jane Roberts fan, and she did channeled Seth. And I wondered, and lo and behold, long story short, Kim and Teresa ended up at my door, and we ended up channeling groups. And what turned out, this was revealed to us over a period of time, was that they said you could call us angels, and that they were here to give us step-by-step instructions for world peace, one person at a time, starting with each individual. And this book is not just the 6 master sessions that we channeled with the public, but it's also the private triad sessions that we did amongst ourselves, and then our own diaries of how this work began to change our lives. And I'm so grateful to have this account. And it's very powerful to go back and see all those many years ago, 1993, 1994, that they were setting us up for everything that we're doing today. They were setting us up for Einstein, for conflict revolution. And in fact, I do believe there was angelic presence in that channeling, but I believe there was also Einstein and the party didn't want to reveal themselves. In fact, he said later, what if I would have come right out and said, hi, this is Einstein? You might not have been able to handle that back then in the states that you were in. And it's true. So before we get to channeling the angels, I want to just basically walk through these 6 steps to peace that they gave us, because they really set up everything, and they are the process of finding that peace. And so the first session was called Culture. And basically, it was all about explaining to us how when we're born into the world, we are programmed by the voices of the culture that we're born into. So the culture of our family, the culture of our society. If we're born into an English-speaking country, we are programmed to speak English. And we pick up all these voices of culture, and they're programmed into our intellects. So, for example, I grew up in the era of Twiggy. So, of course, the voices of culture were telling me, you have to be thin as a rail. And if you're not thin as a rail, then you're not beautiful. And I was never thin as a rail, so I was never beautiful. And what this session did was it talked about, imagine you have this screen, and on this side are all the voices that tell you you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not thin enough, judgmental, all that stuff. Over here are the voices of the angels telling you, you have more than enough, you're beautiful, you have bounty, you have abundance. And what they were here to do was to erase, there was a line, and they were going to erase this side and pull this side over, so that this is how we lived in our intellectual lives, to have those voices of love and compassion programmed into our voices of culture. And this also helped to explain that when we get triggered by someone, and there's somebody outside ourselves who might actually be telling us we're wrong or bad or not good enough, that if there's not a voice of culture like that programmed into our minds, we won't get triggered by them. But if they're reflecting, then that's how we can figure out how to erase that side, because we own our own inner voices of culture that they mirror within us. The second session then led to what we named conflict resolution. And that was the revolutionary idea that if you have a trigger, if you're involved in a conflict, that the root is inside you or me. And that's where sort of the revolution began, where you look outside yourself, but then you turn it back in to see where the root of that is. And that was also the session where they talked about emotion as electricity. And they first started to introduce this idea that if you divorce why you think you feel something from just having that pure experience of the emotion will come more like electricity running through your body. And I remember the very first time I experimented with this, I had had some sort of disagreement with Teresa, and we were there, to test these theories on our active conflicts. So we would have disagreements, have conflict, and then we would take these pieces and go, well, what does this mean? So I was walking in the gym doing what I always used to do. Well, if she wasn't this and if she wasn't that, and she did this and she did that. And then I thought, well, what does that mean? If I can separate out the thought of why I feel, then it becomes like electricity. And that was maybe the very first time that I was feeling and breathing, because and it wasn't very long. It wasn't like I had to walk for hours feeling and breathing. It was as soon as I divorced that thought from it, it really did become like electricity. And I was so like, oh my gosh, this is revolutionary. And when we finally did have our first fight, which is documented in here called the Green Shirt Day, I was trying to explain this, what I didn't really understand. Like I kept saying, well, there really aren't any issues. It's just emotions that come up, and there's thoughts, but there's not issues, And in that first fight, we were able to then go back to conflict resolution, bring it out. Everybody has their own piece of it. And we were able to like bing and each sit back and go, okay, here's my piece of it. Okay, there's your piece of it. So incrementally, we were just starting these baby steps to figure out what we've come to now. So by the third session, we figured out that they weren't just randomly making stuff up, that they had a very clear program, because inspiration was next. And inspiration was telling us that inspiration is a state of being. It's not something that happens outside you, like, oh, I'm inspired by that sunset. Inspiration, they said, is like a sailor who waits and looks for the wind. And it seems like it's sort of an oxymoron that you could see the wind, but seasoned sailors can look out and see the wind coming, and they get their sails up and they're prepared for the wind to come and fill them up and get them moving. So I wanted to read, it was so profound that we put it on the back of the book, a quote from that session. And when I read this, again, it sounds like modern times, not 1994, but 94, yes, but even more pertinent now. And there's actually a reference to turn off the television in it. I had to laugh because I thought, do the kids even know what televisions are? So I'm gonna replace social media just to give you the feel of modern times. So it says, there is a lethargy that humanity has fallen into. It permeates so many corners of your being that you do not understand how deep it runs. We don't tell you this because we want you to feel bad about yourselves. We tell you this so you will acknowledge it and say, yes, I've been sitting on this couch for so long that I've forgotten how to stand up and turn off the social media. I can walk deep into the woods and wait for the wind. I can prepare myself with humility and grace to wait for the wind to come and fill me. And that is inspiration. So what will it take to get you to stand up? And just quickly looking up the word lethargy, a state of unconsciousness resembling a deep sleep from which an individual can be roused, but into which he at once relapses, actually. He at once relapses. So lethargy, a state of unconsciousness resembling deep sleep from which an individual can be roused, but into which he at once relapses. That sounds to me like the world today, frankly. So inspiration is what we need to continue on doing these steps that are changing the world, that are bringing this new configuration forward. And so the fourth step was about commitment, was that we had to make a commitment to do the work. But more than that, it was about committing to the mystery. They talk so much about at the root of everything is a mystery, and you just will never know. And you have to accept that. And I think that's the humility and the grace that we seek when we're seeking to be able to say, you know what, I don't know, that's a mystery. And that also reminded me of the massage cream conflict I had with Kathy Klein, where we both assumed, she assumed I didn't pay for the massage cream. I assumed I had, but we had no records. And that was such a great lesson for me in committing to the mystery, the assumptions that I want to be there. I want to assume that they're there, but to commit to the mystery and commit to the process. And then the next step is honor and articulation. And that's where we're going through these steps, right? We're realizing we have these voices of culture that are telling us we're not good. They're a reflection of the outside. Our conflicts are turning us back inward to our root, which oftentimes leaves us what we used to call hanging and dang, when we would revolve that and look inside and find the real root and go, dang, it's not that person, it's me, dang. And so we need inspiration to prepare ourselves with humility and grace and commitment to accept the mystery. There's so much mystery that we don't know. And when we do that, we get to where we have to honor ourselves. And then we have to turn to the world and articulate who we are. And they use the example of the award ceremony. Imagine you're at an award ceremony and this person is being honored, and there's people sitting in the audience going, hey, you suck. You know, you wouldn't stand for it. And yet that's what happens inside us, the voices of culture. And so imagine turning that around and being honoring of yourself, and then being able to articulate that. And that was also a very profound learning moment. A lot of the stuff that I learned during this particular time period, I did while skiing, swimming, or walking. And I never forget, I had a conflict with Kim at the time. And I was thinking about this honor and articulation. It's like, wow, I just have to honor how I feel and who I am. And then I have to find a way to articulate that honor to her. And that's a much different thing than going back to her and going, wow, you said this and you said that. So that was a big learning experience. And then the last session was compassion. And it went through all the steps and basically said, if you do this, and you do it this way, you will be aligning yourself to compassion. But the term they used that I loved was compassion. This is our passion. It's our right and our responsibility to feel everything that we feel. It's our duty to ourselves to honor who we are and articulate that honor. And so this book, I think we republished it a few years ago with an update from the three of us, and every time that I go back to it, I'm just amazed. And so today I want to channel the angels and see what they have to say to us on April 2nd, 2022. And I'm going to stop my. Let's all take some deep breaths and really connect. Connect to the non-physical, and let's connect to each other. The part of us that are in the source, in that clarity, in that eternal place that exists in the center of the earth, in the center of our hearts, in the center of ourselves. Turn inward and put aside the thoughts, put aside the thinking, open up our minds to receive, because we will command that only the most divine light shine down upon you at this time, and the greatest good be present here. Welcome, welcome to our circle. We are so honored to be here addressing this important occasion of your gathering. We think every single time that you come together, two or more, you create an opening for this work and this compassion to fill up, not just in you and not just in this small group of people, but as representatives of the entire planet. And bear in mind that each individual is the entire universe. Each individual originates that universe within themselves and has a personal relationship to the entire universe. So even though you don't know anyone on the other side of the world who's in a war zone, or you aren't in contact with the people who might be suffering in India or Pakistan, they are a part of your universe. You see what is right in front of you, but from the center of the earth, you're connected to everything that's going on the planet. And as you've talked about, as you open up yourselves to this truth, you are inviting a much higher vibration and a much higher consciousness to enter your body. And that is exactly right now like the caterpillar that is decomposing at the one hand, and at the other hand is reconstructing into this butterfly. And there's this time between caterpillar and butterfly that is, in one way, utter chaos. Look at your world. It seems like it's utter chaos as it's decomposing and everything is starting to be revealed. The things that 30 or 40 years ago were considered conspiracy theories are now coming to be into the light. But what's happening is humanity is breaking out of that lethargy. So for years and years and years, we'll go back. It's, of course, the whole development of humans from the cave person up until now. But particularly since the industrial age, when the earth started to be affected by human activity on a large scale, is when this awakening has been happening. So years and years before that, if there was the holy wars, or there was wars between countries in the 900, 1100, 1600, even 1800, it wasn't a good thing, but it wasn't destroying the entire planet. It was only when the industrial age came about and resource extraction and using the resources of the earth to wage wars is when the earth, AKA all the humans, started to become out of their lethargy. So imagine you're sleeping and somebody comes with a hot poker and lays it across your arm. You're going to wake up out of your sleep in pain. And that pain is going to bring you into present moment. And that's what's been happening for all hundreds of years since that age that has now accelerated into the nuclear age. And now that pain that is waking people up out of their lethargy is working to bring this consciousness forward. The challenge is that humans are in need of things like the 6 steps to peace, things like conflict revolution. They're in need of knowledge and information and inspiration that are going to show them the bigger picture so that they don't relapse into the lethargy, or they don't get caught in the voices of culture thinking that is all there is, the primary reality. So for example, Russia strikes Ukraine, Ukraine strikes Russia. There's a need right now on a very individual human level for human beings to find their way to that higher consciousness. And we have always been giving information that will help facilitate that change, that will help give you first and foremost that information that you can then, whether you know it or not, influence the people around you by living that way, by not being the one who retaliates or the one that strikes back. It's very, very difficult when you're living in that culture to not react as if you're part of it. And when you don't react as if you're part of it, there's this lonesome feeling because people won't accept you. People can't see what you can see. And therefore, they have their own judgments or their own ideas that they make about who you are. Still, those fall under those voices of culture. And your job is to make sure that inside your own head, those thoughts, those intellectual messages are erased. And sometimes it's a long process. If you're going through a conflict, there's always a wave, right, that you ride with this conflict. And you're starting and you're in the old way where you're blaming the other person. And then you're starting with an awareness of, wait a minute, this is within me. That's a voice of culture in my head. I need to change my thinking process as well as how I'm processing these feelings. So I'm not using these intense negative feelings to marry to a thought that's going to project out onto that person and keep it there. Because now you're cementing in the old way. And when you revolve your focus back and you own it, oh, does it take humility? It's so easy to go, yes, but look at him, look at him, look at her, look at her. Clearly they're doing that. It's not so clear when you're the one in your head that's perpetrating that. And that is the difference between the present moment. So when you're sitting in a room with someone and they're actually there in the present moment, telling you these things at you, that's a present moment. But if you're, like Barbara was describing, in the bathtub trying to process emotion and you hear the voices of those people, that's the voices of culture that are programmed into your head. And intellect is designed to not only create the external world, because the energy is flowing from the center of the earth with all those mathematics coming up, it's breaking outside, it's creating your body, and your body is projecting all of that incredible energy and mathematics to create the entire universe. And your intellect is so much a part of defining that. So it's so much a part of the job to do that. But now you are striving to create, well, we won't say create so much as discover, perhaps, because these are parts of you that already exist, to discover these other parts of yourself, to discover that emotion is an energy that has an entirely different set of circumstances around it than intellectual energy, has a different purpose, has a different feel, a different experience. And when you begin to separate those things out, is actually when you begin to find the wholeness, the ability that you have to be a witness to yourself is essential in doing that and doing that work. Now, what's happening in the world today is that there is so much change going on that you can't see. We don't want you to be fooled by what you see on social media or what you see on the news or what you're reading about, even from your trusted sources. And there are sources to be trusted to report to you what is actually going on. It's not the general voices of culture right now, but if you dig deep enough, you'll find people who are reporting what's going on. But even they have their biases. Even in their unbiasedness, they have their biases. So it's being left up to you to be your own authority. It's being left up to each person to be their own authority. And we will tell you, the old system says there's people outside of you who have authority. There's doctors, there's presidents, there's clergy, there's parents, there's all these other people who have had the authority in your mind that you've given up your authority to them. What happens when you do that is a resentment. As much as one aspect in you wants somebody to tell you desperately what the truth is and what's going on so that you can know for sure, in your intuition, which is rising, there is that voice that says, trust your intuition as authority. And that's terrifying for many people because they've never been in that position. They have always been the followers, lethargically going along with what they're told to do, what the external world dictates to them. And when you take that away, it can be frightening. But that's precisely how people pick up their power. Is you take away that external authority and you're left there with just yourself. Now, what are you going to do? It's up to you to take control of your life, of your domain. No one else can do it. No one else can tell you. Don't be surprised if you still long for someone to tell you what's going on, because that's quite natural. But what you want to do is create a circle of souls around you that will support your leadership of yourself. And that's few and far between in the world today, right now. So that's why we have initiated these groups and these discussions, because we are not here to tell you that we are the leaders. In fact, it was the first session on culture where we stressed over and over that this is not a stopping place. We are not creating a cult of people who are going to follow our every word as if we are the ones who know. We are kindly teachers teaching you how to be your own leader, teaching you how to be your own authority, showing you the steps that you can take to become that leader and to become that change. This is the beginning of this movement of this new humanity, where you're going to find that the young people today are much less prone to give in to authority figures. They're much more naturally able to look within themselves and be creative and be expressive. It doesn't mean they don't have learning to do as well, but culture is changing. One of the other ways you see is that the support of leaders around the world has diminished. In the United States, there's a very low approval rating of the president, just like there was the president before him. And while this is unsettling, if you're looking at government, it's exactly what should be doing, that people are being forced in communities to go back and find solutions themselves. And more, this will be true. And you're all feeling the call of that. You're all now being able to ponder what it might be like to have to be in that self-sufficient way, not just physically. If there's food supply chain issues, you might have to grow your own food, water sources, things like that, very physical things for some people, emotional things. And you're finding, for example, in the church, and the Pope recently came out to acknowledge the kind of atrocities that the Catholic Church did, particularly through Canada, to the indigenous people and the children. The acknowledgement of that brings about less faith in the church. And this is a good thing. These are all moving towards that butterfly, towards that expansion of human consciousness into being these leaders. And not just leaders of self, but leaders in compassion, leaders to find your own peace within and then honor that peace and articulate it to the world as the finest of leaders have done. So you are the Gandhis, you are the Jesus, you are the John Kennedy, who worked for peace within the government that got him killed. You are the ones who will stand up and face those who may not agree with you and may want to destroy you for suggesting these things. And that's why it's so important for you to have this deep inner connection to compassion, to have this witness who can look past the trivial details of a situation and see the whole, that you are one of billions who are working right now to change the planet, to change yourselves. And we're so committed to you. We are so inspired by you, because this is the hardest work a human can do. You can go plow a field with the horse. You can go work at hard labor in a concentration camp. You can physically be taxed by so many things, but the inner world is a much more difficult journey to take. Partly because so many of you are comfortable. You're not in a concentration camp. You're not under arrest or being tortured in the physical world. You have that comfort in your physical body. You're eating, you're drinking, you have resources. So to go into that inner world that's what the lethargy is about. It's that you're in this comfortable, sleepy place. And then as you wake up, you want to relapse into it because it's just more comfortable to be numb than it is to actually be this full-bodied, full emotional, fully conscious person. If anyone tells you this is easy, they are lying to you. It's easy when you get to that place where you're aligned. It's much easier when you do the hard work than faced with those who are coming after you or the conflicts outside you. It becomes easier to deal with those. You have different steps that you take than before. So before, Barbara, in the pre-angel stage, her sometimes response would be to rage at people. And that was easy in a way, but it wasn't, didn't leave her in peace. It didn't leave her with good relationships. It didn't leave her self-sufficient and taking responsibility for herself. But it was much easier to just unleash on someone in the moment when you're triggered. Now, as she was explaining earlier, there's this difficult path of really pulling that focus off the physical world and revolving it back around, and the humility and the grace to take responsibility for what is really inside you. That is the hardest work of all. But you're doing it. And that is the glorious part. That is what we celebrate every day. And we are with all of you every day. And we share your struggles. And when you're struggling to do that, you're oftentimes being critical of yourself because it doesn't look like you've achieved this peace that you're supposed to have. But we're celebrating because you're doing it. You're doing that process. And every step that you take to do that inner work changes the whole world. And it changes you. It helps you to evolve. And in the bigger, longer picture of after you each die from this life, from this body, and you're reunited in the afterlife with all of us at the party, it will be a big party. And you will see, you will be able to look back on your life and think, oh my gosh, and I thought I wasn't doing it right. Look at what I was doing. I was helping to change the entire world by having the courage and the commitment and the articulation and the compassion to be my own lab rat. And there will be plenty of celebration. There will be plenty of space of peace and surrounded by souls who are even now celebrating your work and celebrating everything that you're doing. We just wish that we could infuse in you our perspective of celebration, even in your hardest times and your hardest processes, because you deserve it. You are the ones being honored for this incredible work that you're doing. And so we're going to open for questions and conversations, but before we do, we just don't want to get too sentimental, but it's difficult not to in a group like this, of those of you who have been working so hard for so long. We infuse you with this light and this honor, and want you to take a moment every day to sit in that position. Imagine yourself, you're sitting backstage and there's a huge honoring ceremony for you, and it's filled up with angels and the party and people who loved you in life who have passed on. And and out comes the host who is telling us all about you and the hard work that you've done in your life and how big your heart is and how successful you are. And now, please honor you. And you come out from behind the stage and you look out at all of us who are giving you a standing ovation and hoping, beyond hope, that you can embrace that with your humility and grace and feel that wonder and that power and that love, because you deserve it. So, is there any questions or conversation you would like to have? We are here.
I'm too busy wiping my teary eyes. Thank you.
I'm in that same space. So thank you for all the courage you're giving me.
You are welcome.
I'm deciding what I'm going to wear for the celebration.
You look beautiful.
Sounds amazing.
Well, we will close the channel just by telling you that we too are wiping our teary eyes. And those tears are partly ours, tears of joy that we get to do this with you every week. We are so honored that Barbara has the commitment and the inspiration to open up her channel every Saturday for us, to come and have different conversations and different points of view and different information that we've been talking about now for nearly 30 years, but somehow it's always new. The world is new, you are new, and we're so proud of all of you, particularly Barbara too, for being this dedicated to us. And her position is going to change a little bit as the evolution progresses, in that she will be called to speak to others, to scientists, to spiritual people, and she's going to bring these Saturday morning sessions that are as much for her as they are for everyone with her. And she has been specially trained to be that spokesperson. And we love her. We love you. And we are always watching and being amazed. Namaste.